They say live television is unpredictable, but no one was prepared for this. The lights were blinding, the cameras unforgiving, and the crowd sat in that artificial TV silence. That kind where everyone's pretending they're not waiting for someone to screw up. But then Robert De Niro leaned forward. His fingers twitched. His lips curled with the kind of smirk that warned, "You're about to witness something you can't unhear." It wasn't a movie set. No rehearsals. No take two. Just a Niro, a suit that didn't give a damn, and a truth he was sick of carrying alone. Be honest, if De Niro and Trump were standing face to face with no cameras, no lawyers, and no teleprompters, who do you think would flinch first? Drop your answer in the comments, and don't pretend it's a tie. The host, a plastic-smiled corporate puppet from a network that prides itself on neutrality, had just finished buttering De Niro up. Some garbage question about legacy and art. But De Niro wasn't here for softballs. His eyes narrowed, chin tilted slightly like he was locking onto a target. Then came the pivot. "I don't want to talk about movies," he said flatly. The audience laughed. Nervous laughter. The kind that dies fast when nobody joins in. "I want to talk about Trump." You could hear shoes scuff. A cough. The host's pupils dilated like he just saw a ghost. "Let me finish," De Niro snapped, shutting down the rehearsed transition. "I've been told to keep quiet, to stay in my lane." But you know who never stays in their lane? That orange lunatic and the coward parade that follows him around like lost dogs begging for scraps. Gasps. Actual gasps. Like people weren't sure if they were watching satire or a hostage video. The control room started flashing red. Producers mouthed cut the segment. The intern working captions gave up and just typed inaudible as De Niro's New York growl punched through the speakers. But he wasn't yelling. That was the scary part. He was calm, controlled, measured like someone who's planned this for months. Maybe years. People like me, we get blacklisted for saying this stuff. They try to erase us. Trump? He gets booked at rallies and paid to puke out racism on cue. And every time someone calls him out, what happens? They get sued, threatened, silenced. But I've got nothing to lose. I'm not here for ratings. I'm here because silence is worse than failure. The audience didn't clap. They didn't know how to react. Some reached for their phones. One woman in the back stood up, unsure if she should cheer or bolt for the exit. And then it happened. De Niro reached into his inside pocket, pulled out a plain manila envelope, and placed it on the table in front of him. He didn't open it, just tapped it once. Slowly. "This goes public the moment I walk off this stage," he said, eyes locked on the camera. "If they want to try me, let them. But if you're still pretending Trump is just controversial and not dangerous, then you're either asleep or you're in on it." At that exact second, the screen glitched. A network fail-safe triggered. That emergency delay buffer meant to censor accidental curse words or wardrobe malfunctions. Only this time, it wasn't triggered by a wardrobe. It was triggered by truth. Raw, jagged, and unfiltered. The host tried to salvage the show with some half-witted comment about both sides. De Niro ignored him, just stared at the crowd. Not with anger, with disappointment. Like a father watching his son sell drugs to buy votes. And when the commercials finally kicked in, everyone in that studio knew something had shifted. This wasn't another celebrity meltdown. This was a declaration, a warning, a dare, and Robert De Niro had just lit the fuse. Before that envelope ever touched the studio table, before the cameras went fuzzy and producers nearly fainted in their headsets, there was a war, cold, then boiling, between Robert De Niro and Donald Trump. And no, this didn't start with politics. It started with ego. Two swollen egos, but only one of them could act. Back in the early 2000s, Trump still had a somewhat human face on television. He was playing pretend CEO on The Apprentice, barking at D-list contestants like a parody of Gordon Ramsay with a comb over. Meanwhile, De Niro was already a monument, 2 Oscars deep, with more range than Trump had functioning brain cells. Trump used to name-drop De Niro at his parties, pretending they were friends. De Niro, on the other hand, referred to Trump as that loud guy with the gold toilets. Then came 2015. Trump announced his presidential run like a car crash holding a Bible. De Niro didn't flinch. He rolled his eyes and went back to filming something serious, probably yelling at Al Pacino over a steak. But when Trump's campaign started gaining speed off the back of racism, lies, and enough hot air to melt a glacier, De Niro snapped. He started off slow. A comment here, a frown there. Then came the infamous, "I'd like to punch him in the face" moment, on camera with conviction. Trump's team fired back by calling De Niro washed up, irrelevant, a Hollywood elitist. De Niro responded with silence, and then with something much louder, money. He quietly funded anti-Trump PACs, donated to grassroots groups, and bankrolled an indie film mint to expose political grift. The catch? Every character in the film was a stand-in for someone from Trump's inner zoo. The guy playing the president had a raccoon on his head and a golf cart in every scene. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. Trump didn't take it well. According to someone who used to work on his media team, he had De Niro's name banned from interviews and would shout at TVs when his movies came on. One Thanksgiving, he allegedly threw a slice of turkey at the screen during Goodfellas. Said it was deep state propaganda. But this feud wasn't just two loud men yelling across coasts. It infected everything. Studios started getting nervous. Project De Niro was attached to got mysteriously shelved. Actors who posted anti-Trump tweets found themselves ghosted by casting directors. It was Hollywood in a hostage situation, and Trump was holding the gun with ketchup on his shirt. De Niro refused to back down, even when anonymous threats started showing up at his Tribeca office. Even when Fox News aired a segment claiming he had ties to radical socialist cults. Even when an unhinged senator suggested putting Hollywood under patriotic review. This wasn't politics anymore. This was personal. De Niro lost friends over this. People he'd known for years chose silence because it was easier, because keeping their mansion deals meant swallowing their dignity. But De Niro? He just kept going, stubborn as hell, honest to a fault, and willing to risk every cushy award season dinner to tell the truth. And truth has a funny way of collecting receipts. Which brings us back to that envelope. That quiet moment before the bomb hit the airwaves. De Niro had waited, watched, endured. Now, he was ready to set the record straight. They'd asked him 3 times before. Each time, he ignored the email or had his assistant write back a polite, "Mr. De Niro is unavailable." The show was called Capital Talk Tonight, but everyone in the industry called it Corporate Tap Dance Live. It was the kind of program that wore a suit too tight and smiled too wide, pretending to be neutral while playing both sides for ad dollars. The hosts acted like referees, but always leaned Republican when the cameras tilted off-center. De Niro had no time for that kind of circus. But the 4th invite was different. It wasn't just an email. It was a hand-delivered envelope. No subject line. No PR spin. Just 2 sentences written in messy black pen. He's going to run again. You're one of the last they'll still let on air. Do what you want. No signature. No letterhead. Just that. He sat with it for a full day before saying anything. Walked around his Tribeca apartment muttering to himself, cursing under his breath, lighting a cigar he didn't even smoke. His lawyer warned him. His agent practically begged. The network was known to slice up interviews and Frankenstein them in post-production. They'd make him look crazy if he slipped up. But that's the thing. De Niro wasn't scared of looking crazy. He was scared of dying quiet. He had stories no one knew. Meetings he sat through. Phone calls he overheard. Names he never said out loud in public. He'd held on to them like loaded bullets, waiting for the right target and the right time. And now Trump was clawing his way back onto the stage, pretending January 6th was just a bunch of tourists who got lost on their way to Cracker Barrel. That was enough. He called the producer himself. No agent. No studio rep. Just him, raw and bored of games. "I'll do it," he said. "But if you cut my mic, I walk. If you edit my words, I sue." The producer laughed nervously, said they'd welcome robust dialogue. De Niro didn't laugh. He just hung up. 3 days later, he got a package in the mail. It had no return address, but he knew where it came from. Inside was a manila folder. Real documents. Real signatures. All tied to a hush-hush real estate deal between someone with the initials DJT and a foreign billionaire who mysteriously vanished 6 months after the deal closed. De Niro stared at the pages, then placed them carefully in the same envelope he'd carry onto the show. This wasn't about a grudge anymore. This was about breaking the wall of silence that had turned American politics into a paid improv act. If the studios were too scared, if the newsrooms were too neutered, then fine. Let the actor do it. Let the guy with nothing left to prove set fire to the table and walk away before dessert. He shaved. He pressed his own suit. He told his team not to come. When his driver asked, "Where to?" De Niro answered like he was heading into court. "Someplace I should have gone a long time ago." He arrived at the studio 5 minutes early. The assistant at the front desk smiled too hard and avoided eye contact. The makeup girl asked if he wanted powder. He said no. "I want them to see every damn wrinkle." The host came to greet him, holding out a hand with fake warmth. "Robert, thank you for coming." De Niro looked him dead in the face. "You sure about that?" 5 minutes later, the red light blinked on, and he never blinked once. If you're watching this and still haven't subscribed, ask yourself, is it because you're okay with staying silent while crooks run the country? Or maybe you're just too comfortable letting others fight for the truth while you scroll past? Don't be that person. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video, or admit you're part of the problem pretending it doesn't exist. We have a target to hit 50 subscribers before the end of April, and you can make this happen for us. Please subscribe. The air inside the studio wasn't normal. It was too still, like before a thunderstorm. Cameras clicked into place. Lights turned white hot. And on screen, millions of people leaned in, expecting Robert De Niro to smile, crack a joke, maybe promote a film no one would remember by next month. Instead, he sat forward, elbows on the table, envelope at his side. Not once did he touch his water. The host did, though, 3 times in the first 2 minutes, sipping like his throat was closing up. They started with pleasantries. Some hollow question about De Niro's impact on cinema. He grunted, gave a short answer. It was dead weight. The host knew it. He shuffled his papers, then tried a new angle. "So, Robert, given your strong opinions, do you think Donald Trump deserved his second term?" That was it. That was the matchstick. De Niro's head tilted, slow and deliberate, like a lion sizing up something dumb enough to walk into the cage. "Deserve," he repeated, voice low. "That man deserves something, sure. But it's not 4 more years. It's 4 to 10 in a concrete box." The host blinked. Someone in the control room choked on their headset mic. But De Niro wasn't done. Not even close. "I didn't come here to debate policy," he said. "I came to say this clearly with the whole country watching. Donald Trump is a con artist, a racist, and a national stain. And I'm done pretending like we need to respect that garbage just because he once had his name on a steak box." The crowd didn't know what to do. Clap? Gasp? Faint? The host jumped in, trying to salvage it with some old TV trick. "Well, we always encourage passionate views here, Robert, but..." "No," De Niro cut in. "Don't do that. Don't clean it up. Don't both sides this. I've been quiet while that clown turned politics into reality TV. I stayed out of it when he bragged about grabbing women. I stayed quiet when he fed his base a diet of lies and rage like it was Sunday brunch. But now he's trying to run again like we forgot what he did." The camera cut wide. The producer, somewhere offstage, was waving both hands like a traffic cop during a blackout. Too late. The feed was hot. The truth was loose. Then De Niro did it. He picked up the envelope. Calm. Slow. Like he wasn't holding fire in his hands. "This," he said, tapping the seal, "is why I came." The host, wide-eyed, leaned back slightly. He knew that look. That was the "I'm about to wreck your whole franchise" look. Inside that envelope were copies of contracts, dates, offshore wire transfers, all tying Trump to a real estate fixer. The same one who went missing a few years back after mouthing off about hush money. De Niro didn't wave it around. He didn't need to. He just placed it on the table like a landmine and stared at the camera. "I've given copies to journalists. Real ones. Not the cowards at legacy networks who kiss power's feet for ad revenue. This goes public the second I walk out of here. And if Trump wants to sue me, let him. I've got time. He's the one who should be worried about time. In prison." The studio dropped to full silence. Like someone had hit mute on reality. No coughs. No fake laughter. Just the hum of expensive lighting. The host tried once more, stuttering something about allegations and opinions, but his voice cracked like a kid in trouble. De Niro leaned in closer. "You're scared. I get it. They want you quiet. But silence helps cowards. I'm not here to help. A few audience members clapped. Not many. They were scared too. But the dam had cracked. And then, the feed cut. Not gently. Not a fade to black. Just bam. Sudden commercial. A deodorant ad with a smiling guy playing tennis. Social media exploded within seconds. Hashtag Niro bomb trended before the credits even rolled. Fox tried to spin it as a meltdown. Newsmax called it elder abuse in real time. But the clips leaked. Someone in the studio filmed everything with their phone and uploaded it straight to Reddit. It spread like fire on gasoline. De Niro walked off set without a word. No handshake. No backstage interview. Just picked up his coat and left. The envelope, still on the desk, glowing like a warning. And the host. He sat there frozen, hand still on his water glass, suddenly aware that history just passed him by. And he blinked. The next morning, every media outlet was spinning. Some called it brave. Others called it meltdown. Trump's echo chamber tried to flip it into a senior moment gone wrong. But no one could distract from one burning question. What the hell was in that envelope? By 10 a.m., the leak started. Quiet at first. Then like a crack in a dam, everything flooded. It wasn't just dirt. It was radioactive. Inside were contracts, wire transfer records, names, locations, hidden shell companies based out of Malta, Belize, and, no joke, a tiny island in the South Pacific used in the past to launder cartel money through fake tourism businesses. But what made people's jaws hit the floor wasn't the offshore cash funneling. It was the who and the why. One document showed a 2017 agreement between a real estate holding group and a mysterious investment firm called Patriot Dev Group. Clean-sounding name, dirty purpose. It was a front. One created to hide asset movement out of U.S. jurisdiction right after Trump took office. That alone would have raised eyebrows. But stapled to that agreement was a notarized memo signed by a man who used to be Trump's personal fixer long before Michael Cohen ever got thrown under the bus. His name wasn't public. He was old school, a man with no online footprint and an address that led to a storage facility in Reno. In the memo, he detailed the real purpose behind the company. It wasn't just about protecting assets. It was about scrubbing names from real estate deals, including one that involved the silent purchase of a former correctional facility in rural Georgia. Why would anyone buy a rundown jail in the middle of nowhere? Because Trump's people allegedly planned to convert it into a detention center for political troublemakers, activists, whistleblowers, even media figures labeled as anti-American. It was like someone ripped pages out of a dictator's playbook and slapped them into a real estate contract. And that wasn't even the worst part. Another file, more grainy, scanned, barely legible, showed an internal communication between PDG execs and a name buried in conservative media circles. The memo outlined payment plans for several far-right influencers who were being coached on how to smear specific actors and directors critical of the administration. De Niro was named number one on that list. Right below him, John Legend, Mark Ruffalo, Ava DuVernay, and even a children's author who had tweeted something snarky about Trump's hair in 2016. They weren't just targets of online hate. They were on a literal spreadsheet titled Narrative Disruption Targets. The funding for the smear campaigns came from shell accounts linked to donors who, up until then, had been considered above suspicion. Private jet owners, museum sponsors, big names from Wall Street who smiled for Vogue, but signed off on Black Ops propaganda through group chats with Republican strategists. The envelope had proof, not theories, not hearsay. It also included something unexpected, a USB drive. Journalists who got hold of the contents found hours of audio from an old security contractor hired for one of Trump's private golf courses. He'd wired a guest room Trump used for off-the-record meetings with lobbyists and shady international businessmen. The guy thought he was recording for insurance purposes, in case Trump stiffed him on payment. Instead, he captured conversations where Trump openly discussed how to flip certain blue states by creating fear zones and letting things get out of control just enough. That clip leaked online by afternoon. You could hear Trump's voice, clear as day, say the phrase. You give him just enough chaos, they'll beg you to fix it. That's how you take a city without a tank. Boom. Cable news anchors tripped over their words, trying to cover it without getting sued. Trump's legal team scrambled like rats in a burning limo. They claimed deepfake, but the recording was verified by 2 separate labs before noon. The envelope was more than scandal. It was evidence of intent. It showed how deep Trump's delusion ran, how he thought he was building an empire when all he was doing was rotting the floorboards of democracy while posing with cheeseburgers and flags. Robert De Niro, the washed-up actor as Trump once called him, had just dropped a nuke. And he did it without yelling, without Twitter, without a single campaign ad. Just a manila envelope and enough guts to say what the cowards in suits wouldn't. Donald Trump was golfing when it hit the headlines, a crooked swing in Florida heat, his red cap barely hanging on when one of his assistants sprinted across the course like she'd just seen a ghost. She handed him a phone. He squinted. Then he froze. There it was. A still image of Robert De Niro at the Capitol Talk Tonight table, one hand resting on a thick envelope, the other pointing straight at the camera. The headline underneath read, De Niro drops evidence of Trump-linked political blacklist and secret detention facility. Trump exploded. Witnesses said he threw his 9-iron into a water hazard and screamed, "Get Hannity on the phone now." By the time his blood pressure returned to the barely stable zone, he was already firing off a flurry of rage posts on Truth Social. Robert De Niro is a failing loser. Sad. Totally made up papers. Fake news. Total hit job by the Hollywood elites. Investigate De Niro now. The usual caps lock temper tantrum. But this one was more frantic, more unhinged. His team knew the difference. They always knew when it wasn't just noise, when the man was genuinely rattled. Within hours, Trump's legal team, fresh off their 5th scandal of the month, issued a shaky press release claiming De Niro was part of an organized attack on American freedom. They tried to say the documents were fabricated, the audio was edited, and the offshore accounts were routine business holdings. It didn't help. The public was already wide awake. Within 24 hours of the broadcast, 3 former Trump aides came forward. 2 offered anonymity. One didn't bother. "Yeah, we all knew about the jail plan," said the former aide in a surprise live interview. They talked about it like it was a damn spa resort for Democrats. Called it the Patriot Processing Center, like we were branding a fast food chain. Then came the celebrities. Ruffalo, Legend, DuVernay, all confirmed they'd been harassed, stalked, or mysteriously dropped from projects. Suddenly, De Niro's spreadsheet didn't look like some paranoid printout. It looked like a blueprint. Meanwhile, right-wing media had a full meltdown. Fox ran a Robert De Niro's mental decline segment every hour on the hour. Newsmax invited a forensic signature expert who had never actually examined a real document, but confidently declared, "This smells like Hollywood fiction." OEN just screamed into the camera for 30 minutes with an eagle screeching in the background. But the people didn't care. Protests sparked outside network headquarters that had tried to bury the clip. At the same time, small-town newsrooms started receiving copies of the envelope, anonymously. It had become the digital equivalent of Samizdat, passed from inbox to inbox, USB to USB, no central authority, no chain of command. Just pure panic for the Trump camp. And then, for the first time in years, something rare happened. Congress moved. 3 moderate senators, one of them from a state Trump used to own like a monopoly square, issued a joint letter calling for a formal investigation. Not into De Niro, into the contents of the envelope. It sent Trump into another spiral. He barked orders to sue everyone, De Niro, the network, the caterers, maybe even the chair he sat on during the interview. But nothing landed. Lawyers quit mid-email. Judges laughed them out of court. One clerk reportedly passed a note across the bench that just said, "You're cooked." Back in Hollywood, De Niro wasn't hiding. He wasn't ducking cameras or posting cryptic captions on Instagram. He did what only someone with nothing to lose would do. He doubled down. He showed up at the Today Show, unshaved, in a plain black jacket, and said bluntly, "I said what I said." He can scream all he wants. Doesn't change the facts. And that was that. The man who played mob bosses, cab drivers, and ticking time bombs for a living had taken down a real one. Not with fists, not with bullets, but with receipts. And America, for the first time in a long time, stopped what it was doing and paid attention. The country didn't split cleanly. It cracked like glass, messy, sharp, loud. 1 week after De Niro's live TV bomb, you could feel it on sidewalks, in diners, on the floor of Congress, and in every coffee shop where someone was pretending not to eavesdrop. The line wasn't left versus right anymore. It was reality versus whatever Trump's cult decided was more convenient to believe that morning. On one side, you had those who saw De Niro's drop for what it was, a brutal truth with footnotes. People who were sick of the constant gaslighting, the whataboutism, and the idea that patriotism meant cosplaying as a militia while drooling over authoritarianism. These folks, teachers, nurses, truckers, rappers, retirees with nothing left to lose, stood up and said enough. They printed out the leaked documents, passed USBs around like underground mixtapes, made memes, protest signs, art. Some even tattooed lines from De Niro's broadcast on their arms like scripture. On the other side, the usual suspects. Trump's cult doubled down, like they always do when reality taps them on the forehead. They called the documents fake, even though every one of them had verified signatures. They said the audio was AI, even though it matched recordings from Trump's own campaign events. One guy on Facebook, who listed his job as free thinker/alpha wolf, claimed De Niro was an actor playing De Niro in order to destroy America from within. Fox started calling it the envelope hoax. Newsmax pushed a theory that De Niro was working with George Soros, Oprah, and a rogue NASA employee named Vince. Meanwhile, the truth just kept pouring out, cold, boring, provable truth. And it hurt. Online, battle lines were drawn in real time. Threads turned to trenches. Friendships ended over DMs. Thanksgiving plans were canceled 6 months in advance. You couldn't even say envelope on some parts of Facebook without being banned or called communist. In Hollywood, the response was electric. Studios that used to tiptoe around politics finally found their spine. A-list actors started wearing plain white t-shirts that read, "I believe Bob." Billie Eilish tweeted De Niro MAGA. Spielberg offered to fund a documentary with no title, just the interview footage and the evidence. Someone even floated the idea of a movie called The Envelope, with De Niro playing himself. He said no. "This isn't a script," he growled. "It's a damn warning." But the ugliest split was inside Washington. Republicans, predictably, tried to spin it. "This is all a distraction," one senator barked during a press conference, eyes twitching like he forgot how microphones work. Another one, fresh off voting against a bill to feed school kids, called De Niro a domestic threat on live radio. Nobody clapped, but some Republicans, the ones with pollsters whispering bad news in their ears, started sweating. Their base was shrinking. Independents were jumping ship. Even a few suburban boomers were asking, "Wait, we funded what in Georgia?" And Trump? He became more unstable by the day. He went on a rant at a rally in Alabama that ended with him challenging De Niro to a televised cage fight, claiming he could take the guy easy despite the fact that he struggled to walk a ramp in sensible shoes. But the damage was done, and not in the usual oops, another scandal way. This wasn't locker room talk or shady tax stuff. This was structure-level rot, proof of coordinated manipulation, threats, money laundering, and yes, plans to detain critics in a facility dressed up as patriotism. And now, everyone had to pick a side. You either back the man with the envelope, the one who risked his career, his safety, and whatever piece he had left, or you back the guy screaming on stage about light bulbs and windmills while his team quietly tried to shred evidence behind him. There was no middle anymore. Not when the facts were on paper. Not when the truth had names, timestamps, and digital fingerprints. So America chose, and not everyone chose well. Robert De Niro didn't disappear. He didn't vanish into a villa or retreat to some ocean view silence like most celebrities do after going nuclear. He showed up. He walked the streets. He held press conferences in alleyways and diners. No velvet ropes. No PR filters. Just him, raw, with the same message. They lied, I didn't, and you saw it for yourself. In America, it was still buzzing. New investigations were opening. Networks that once mocked him were now re-airing the full clip without edits, begging for forgiveness between commercial breaks. Meanwhile, Trump's camp had gone oddly quiet. Not surrender, quiet. More like lawyered up, burning hard drives, quiet. His inner circle started cracking, one by one. A former aide flipped. A major donor went missing for 72 hours before reappearing in the Bahamas on vacation. Yeah, sure. But the question was hanging in the air now. Heavy. Was this the knockout punch? Or just the bell for round two? Trump wasn't done. Everyone knew that. The man was addicted to power like a bad gambler at a slot machine. He'd claw his way back through lawsuits, rallies, and conspiracies with more flags and facts. His loyal crowd would still bark, witch hunt, while ignoring the pile of signed confessions under their boots. And in Niro? He wasn't done either. There were whispers. A second envelope. Another name. A sitting senator. Maybe even a media exec. Nobody knew, for sure. But people were watching differently now. Closer. Eyes wider. Lies didn't slide as easy. And fear, the kind that once kept everyone quiet, started fading. This wasn't about Trump versus De Niro anymore. It was about truth versus noise. And that noise? It's losing pitch. Now listen, if you followed this story to the end and you're not subscribed, I need to ask you why. Is it because you're scared of the truth? Or maybe you're fine with pretending all this corruption is just politics as usual? Look, if you're still unsure, that's your choice. But silence never aged well in history books. And let's be real, if you don't subscribe, maybe, just maybe it's because deep down, you're more comfortable in the dark. Don't let that be you. Subscribe, like the video, share it with someone who still thinks Trump is a straight shooter. Drop a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. Whether you're in New York, Alabama, Lagos, London, or sitting in your car wondering how we ended up here, your voice matters. And one more thing, keep your eyes open, because if you thought this envelope shook the room, you have no idea what's coming next. Stay loud, stay bold, stay awake. See you in the next one.